Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at the latest on the Nazem Kadri situation. And is he already signed? So, you have to go back to what has happened here with Nazem Kadri. He's been a really good hockey player. He was drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs, grew up in Ontario, and things didn't work out, right? Obviously, Kyle Dubas trades him a couple years back in a trade for Tyson Barrie and a couple of other players in the deal. Alexander Kerfoot was a part of that as well. Nazem Kadri ends up in Colorado, looking to redeem himself. He's known as a guy that can't produce in the playoffs, always gets penalized during the playoffs, missing games, getting ejected from games. And finally, Nazem Kadri comes over that hump, and he wins a Stanley Cup and is one of the more dominant players in the playoffs this year. So now he's a free agent, and he's priced himself out of returning to Colorado. And there's a couple of links for Nazem Kadri that we have to look at. So he's been linked to plenty of teams across the National Hockey League. The St. Louis Blues were one of those teams, right? You have to assume that they still are, considering they were in on Matthew Tkachuk. The New Jersey Devils, I think to a lesser extent, they've got some really good centers, but they could be still in the mix. You look at some other teams around the league, like the New York Islanders and the Philadelphia Flyers. So here's what we've been hearing recently. And of course, this is going to be themed around the Islanders. But this from Peter Bow. He says multiple teams are still trying to clear cap space to sign Nazem Kadri. He's ruled out signing with any team not viewed as a contender. So all those teams with a ton of cap space at the bottom half of the league, the Ducks, Coyotes, Sabres, Stars, and you could maybe argue teams like the Senators, Blackhawks, right? So that's what we're looking at. Now, here's the interesting thing. The Islanders are projected to have $11 million of cap space, which is enough to sign Nazem Kadri. Now, you also have to remember the Islanders side of things. They have other guys to sign. They technically have three restricted free agents. Probably their second pairing defense entirely, Noah Dobson and Alexander Romanov, who they acquired before the NHL draft. And they also have Kiefer Bellows, who I think they'll just work out a small 1-year, $800K contract. I think that's what we're looking at for Bellows. But the other two, Dobson and Romanov, there seems to be more here. Now, if you know anything about Lou Lamoriello, I would say he is now the second best in the NHL, other than Steve Yzerman, at keeping things very close to the vest. And you may be wondering, well, what is he talking about? Lou Lamoriello is infamous for the way, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube about this, but the way Lou Lamoriello runs things is very meticulous. The way he runs his teams, the way they do contracts, he's very stubborn in that sense. So think of it this way. Forward numbers have to be below, I think, 30. Defenseman numbers have to be, all players' numbers have to be below a certain number. So if you guys remember back in the day, the Islanders had guys like Adam Pelech. He had a number, I think, like some weird number, right? Now he has number 3. Anthony Beauvillier was infamous for wearing number 72. Now he wears number 18. All these players have to wear certain numbers. And again, this is a Lou Lamoriello thing. There's no real reason for it, but it's the way he handles things. He also is very known for being a guy that is very stingy with contracts, but likes to overpay veterans. So when you look at a guy like Nazem Kadri, could you consider him maybe a guy that they overpay as a veteran? That would be right up Lou Lamoriello's alley. Now here's the other thing. Nazem Kadri has ties to Lou Lamoriello. Nazem Kadri was on the Toronto Maple Leafs when Lou Lamoriello was the general manager for a couple of years. In the midst of the rebuild, before Kyle Dubas came in, Lou Lamoriello was the GM of the Leafs while Naz was in Toronto. So there is a connection there. And Lou does have a tendency to pick up former players. You look at guys right now. Zach Parise, who we drafted first overall. Other guys like Kyle Palmieri, Travis Zajac, Andy Green. These are all former guys. Corey Schneider, right? You want to go down the list of all the guys that have played under Lou in the past. So Nazem Kadri does fit that bill. And here's the other thing. Lou Lamoriello is very infamous for keeping things very close to the vest, like I mentioned. Which could mean there could be a contract already done here, and we don't know it yet. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, if that's the case, why would Lou Lamoriello do that? Leverage. So think of it this way. And the Philadelphia Flyers are a perfect example of this. If you guys remember the Flyers here at the draft, they kept trying to move out all these players. Ivan Provorov, Travis Konechny, whatever the player is. James Van Riemsdyk. It's all about motive. Why? Every GM across the league knew why the Flyers were looking to move those players out. It's a game of chess. You have to play 5 steps ahead. So here's what you have to be thinking. You would have been helping the Flyers if you made a trade for them to, say, acquire James Van Riemsdyk or Ivan Provorov or Travis Konechny or one of those players because you're moving out cap space. Why are the Flyers moving out cap space at the draft? So they could pursue Johnny Gaudreau in free agency. So why would any team in the NHL just help out the Flyers? No, they know why the Flyers are moving out those contracts. Because think of it this way. We're not playing NHL GM mode here. Let's say you move Provorov for 2 first-round picks and a prospect. He's not worth that, but we're just going with that. Okay? So now the Flyers get all those assets, and they free up the cap space to then sign Johnny Gaudreau in free agency. What team is going to give up that to help out the Flyers? No team is going to do that. So that's where the Islanders step in. And that's where Lou not telling us what the contracts are kind of indicates that. Now, if you guys remember last summer, Lou Lamoriello signed Zach Parise and I think Corey Schneider and some other guys to very small contracts. And he wouldn't announce the actual contract details. Why would he do that? Because the Islanders had guys that were potentially offer sheet eligible. Which means, look at teams like the New York Rangers right now. They don't have the money to technically re-sign Kaapo Kakko to a certain contract. So if a team really wanted Kaapo Kakko right now, they know the Rangers' dollars. They know, let's say they offer $3 million, and the Rangers have $2 million in cap space. The Rangers cannot accept an offer or cannot match an offer sheet for Kaapo Kakko right now. Now, I guess they're not that worried about losing him, and again, this is where the kind of cat and mouse game comes in. But Lou Lamoriello is being smart about this because let's say they have $11 million in cap space right now. Well, if they announce that they sign Nas to a $10 million contract per season, that means the Islanders have $1 million in cap space, which means both Dobson and specifically Alexander Romanov as well cannot sign a contract. If the Islanders have $1 million, they cannot match an offer sheet to either of those guys, and now Lou loses all his leverage. That's why the Islanders could be doing this. Now, again, this is just a theory. Not saying this is true. We don't know if Nazem Kadri did sign with the Islanders. It hasn't been confirmed by anybody. But if there's anybody out there, a guy that's been in the business since the 90s, in the 80s, he's been a owner of the New York Yankees at a time, was the GM of the Devils during their dynasty era with, Jamie Langenbrunner, Marty Brodeur, all those guys. It wouldn't be in the least of my thought. There is definitely a possibility that is what Lou Lamoriello is doing here. Now, again, things have been so quiet about Nazem Kadri, and you would think by this point he would want to have had a contract signed. Think about it logistically for him, right? He wants to know where he's going to live. He wants to buy a house. He wants to have all that stuff figured out before the season starts and before training camp gets going. So whether it's the Islanders or another team across the league, you would have to think Nazem Kadri has some kind of idea on where he's signing. Now, maybe he's keeping his options open, and he really is dead set on he wants a certain contract that maybe isn't out there. That is very much a possibility. But I have this weird suspicion that's telling me, is this Lou Lamoriello playing his little games again and using his leverage? Because again, he does have guys that could be offer sheeted. And maybe he's looking at it as an opportunity for maybe another team to steal one of his coveted defensemen, which I think Romanov is exempt from an offer sheet. That might not be the case here for Noah Dobson. So again, these are just things you have to look 10 steps ahead. And I think that's where this whole story kind of lies. So we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, I am very interested to see what happens here. Because if Nazem Kadri does sign with the Islanders or the Blues or one of these teams, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Because you look at a guy like Evander Kane, right? Evander Kane was talking about he wanted $7 million per year for a 6 or 7 year deal. And he looked at the marketplace, and it wasn't out there. So what does he do? He re-signs with the Oilers because that's what worked. And I think he truly does at some level, he does genuinely want to win in Edmonton. He sees what's there. He saw what happened last year. They got better with a new goaltender, right? So I think when you look at the market, maybe Kadri and guys like Kane were expecting a certain amount of money to be out there that wasn't necessarily there when they thought it was. And maybe Kadri's dealing with that. Or, like I said, something's already written in ink and it's already on paper. It's just nobody else knows about it. And if there's anybody in the industry that can do that, it is Lou Lamoriello, the GM of the New York Islanders. And again, talking about Alexander Romanov, to kind of add to that, he's been playing in an Islanders practice jersey, which would lead you to believe, kind of like we saw Zach Parise last year. He was quote-unquote signed by the Islanders, but nobody knew the details of the contract. I think that could be something happening here with Romanov as well. He's already signed. He's got the Islanders practice jersey on, except we don't know what the dollar amount is. So we'll see what happens, guys. Of course, I'll let you know when stuff happens. But thank you so much for watching this video, and let me know what you guys think down below, and I will see you again next time.